Welcome back to the Qreative Life podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Quraishi, but you can call me Q. This episode features Austin-based photojournalist Michael Maly. Maly began taking his photography seriously just 5 years ago, and since that time, he's earned a reputation in Austin for his work photographing musical acts and local landscapes. Listen as we discuss his creative journey and artistic philosophy. Welcome to the Qreative Life podcast, Michael Maly. It's good to talk to you, friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Say that I listened to some of the previous ones and I'm curious as to maybe why I'm here. It's like I haven't written any New York Times bestseller books. Like, I don't know. So,
well, there's a couple things. I am very passionate about creativity and art being accessible to every single person. But I will also say that as somebody who has followed your work for a long time, I'm a big fan. I actually think you're a brilliant photographer, and it helps that I like your subject matter. Because you do a lot of music photography.
Yeah.
But your compositions are great. I mean, you have, to me, it's really clear that you are an artist, right? You're not just out there capturing images, photoshopping them and, whatever. I mean, you're making art, and you can tell by the way your photos come out.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I don't know how to respond, to be quite honest.
Come on. I guess what it is we're all doing most of us have some kind of creative pastime and whatever, but you can really tell when there's thought put behind something, right? Mm-hmm. And especially when you follow somebody for a while, whether it's online or wherever, but if you're following somebody's work and you can really start to see these consistent measures of quality showing up, or these different perspectives that you come to rely on. And, mm-hmm. I follow a few photographers and I can definitely pick yours out. I can say, oh, that's one of Michael's. So good for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I noticed that I have a sort of a style, but it's not something that I think about. It's just something that comes out, and I don't do it with any intent. Yeah, but that's cool that you can pick it out, because I do a lot of different types of photography. I enjoy street photography. Obviously, music is the bulk of my work, specifically live music, which was just kind of a no-brainer for me.
And I just want to clarify, I don't want to give the impression when I say that there's thought behind your work that it's overly cerebral or that it looks formulaic. That's not it at all. I guess what I'm saying is that there is intentionality behind it, right? Mm-hmm. And you can sense that inspiration there. And it's the work of somebody who pays attention also. Mm-hmm. It's the work of somebody who actually has a connection to their subject matter and is really trying to convey it in a unique and special way. And to me, that's the essence that's what we're all trying to do as artists, right? In some form or fashion.
Yeah, for sure. I think, at the core of it is just, we all, or most of us, have the urge to create or do something, creative and make something out of nothing. I think the tricky part is just being completely honest and not having any fear about what you're putting out there, and not thinking about what people, not thinking about an audience, or just trying to convey how you see the world in as honest a manner. But that also means that you have to be pretty in touch with yourself and honest with yourself in order to make that happen. And
I wonder if you could tell me, just kind of to kick off our conversation, how you came to photography. I mean, have you always been a creative person? Have you used different mediums? And what was it that sort of attracted you? Because you're the first photographer on this podcast so far. Yeah. So let's get into it. Yeah. Talk to me about your journey.
Thank you so much, man. I don't know how much time you have for this conversation, but
all the time you need, my friend.
Photography, really, I didn't start doing photography seriously until about maybe 5 years ago, right before the pandemic. Creativity, the music aspect of my life has always been there ever since I can remember, since I was a small child. I didn't really have any outside influence. My parents didn't listen to a lot of music. I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. My earliest recollections of being fascinated with the sound that was coming out of a speaker and just wanting to listen to it all the time. And so I would consume it as much as possible. As I got older, I did drawing when I was, younger, just because I guess I always felt like I had some sort of drive to be creative in some sort of way. And I've always written a little bit, just, thoughts that are going on in my head. A lot of, there's a lot of writing on bar napkins and
Uh-huh.
notepads from restaurants that I worked in. And,
Uh-huh.
I just had like folders of just random stuff.
Have you
And then
saved all of that?
most of it, yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. I go back
Yeah.
and look at it every now and then and try to figure out what was going on in the mind of that young, sad, depressed. But photography, my dad did a decent amount of photography and I never really paid much attention to it. I was always fascinated with his camera, but he never really introduced me to photography or we never had conversations about it. I always carried a camera around when I was younger. I'm not sure why. I just kind of felt like it was, something I would do. I'd like to take pictures of things that I was doing, you
Can I
know.
ask how old you are?
I have pictures from when I was, a little bit in high school, more when I got into like my early 20s. It became a
Hmm.
little bit more constant then. And then when I started writing, I had a music blog that I started in around 2007 called Sonic Itch Music, and I covered a lot of live shows. And I had a fantastic photographer friend who I convinced to come along with on this little, journey of mine. And she did most of my live concert photography for the site. And then when she wasn't available, I just filled in. So like my first real concert shooting experience on I guess you could call it professional level was Lollapalooza, which was which was an interesting experience. She
Like
gave me
the OG, the original one?
no, this was in Chicago. It was probably, I think it was 2009,
I
maybe.
see. Okay.
And I had one, photo pass and, I just had one media pass. So I had to take care of all of it. And, she gave me a quick, 10-minute lesson on how to use the camera, manual camera, and let me borrow one of hers. And, you know, I'm standing in the pit with guys that are shooting for Rolling Stone and Stereo Gum. And I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but let's go for it. So, and then I just did it, as I didn't really think of myself as a photographer. It was more just out of necessity, that I took photos, and my early stuff is absolutely terrible. I have a handful of prints that I've done that I was proud of. I was like, oh, that actually looks pretty decent. I'll keep those. Then in January of 2020, I was at a New Year's Day party with some friends of mine, and I was having a conversation with the host, the woman who I respect so much. And she asked me a question. She said, what are you doing with your photography? And I think at the time maybe I didn't even own a camera. And I was like, why would you ask me a question like that? Like, where's that coming from? She's like,
Wow.
I don't know. She's like, I think you're really good and you should do it more. And for some reason, it just set off something. And when I got home, I ordered a camera, and I've been consuming photography and videography and visual stuff since then for the last 5 years. Just like I shoot almost every single day, if it's just around the house or walking down the street. So I'm not sure why that conversation sparked something inside me, but I thank her very much for it. I don't think she realizes the impact that it had on my life.
That's amazing. Okay. Can I ask you what your age is now?
I'm 55.
Okay. So you and I are same generation. And I can kind of relate to this journey because I've started doing all kinds of random creative things in the last few years. And I had this really interesting conversation actually in my last episode with a longtime friend of mine who is also in our age group, and he took up painting in over the pandemic, and it's really interesting to me how you get to a certain point in your life and all of a sudden you're like, well, I want to try this thing. And you have to sort of battle, like, I'm saying you rhetorically, you have to kind of battle your internal kind of uh, feelings of inadequacy. Like if you're starting something relatively new or pursuing something relatively new, you're gonna suck. Like you said, your early stuff sucked, and everybody's
Yeah.
early stuff sucks.
Yeah.
Did you find it difficult to push through that, or are you the type of person that is just like, well, fuck it, I'm I'm going to suck and until I'm good, which would be ideal. But a lot of us get hung up there.
Are you speaking specifically like when this kind of kicked off in like 2020, like how I was
Yeah,
approaching
yeah, yeah.
it?
Like that you were going to make this a thing that you do now and put your name behind it.
It wasn't like I don't know. I don't even feel like it was like this is the thing that I want to do now. It just like I guess it just sparked whatever was already there and just amplified it so much that I was like, why am I not doing this? I'm going to do this all the time. I don't care where it takes me. I don't care if I make any money at it. I don't care if I'm ever be, I mean, sure, I'll get better at it. I don't know how good I'm going to be at it, but I never feel like I'm producing the work that I think that I want to be producing.
Right.
So I just, I, music's been like number one in my life as far as like my passion and my, all-time companion. Now photography is like riding side by side, and it's like I don't know, I can't see myself not doing it, no matter where it goes. Yeah, I didn't really, and I think I was probably fortunate because that happened right before the pandemic, so I had all this time to just kind of explore, and I didn't have distractions of like having to go to a job or do this. It was just like just go out and have fun and play with the camera, and see where it
Yeah.
goes, and then once everything came back, I'd already kind of like established a routine or a system and like had, ways of doing it. But I think at first you're like, I'm not sure what to do with this. I think you just have to just do it,
Yeah.
you just have to jump into the void and hope
Yeah.
something good comes of it. I think the unknown is probably the most exciting thing about life. And just kind of throwing yourself out there.
Totally agree. You know what? This is actually a common refrain when I talk, because I talk to a lot of people all the time about being creative. And a lot of times the people who, everybody has, first of all, I think everybody's creative to some extent. Like we all
Oh yeah.
have that need and desire to create things.
Hmm.
But when it comes to kind of finding that thing that you excel at, that's going to push you to continue to improve, that's going to make you, um, it's just going to turn you, like it turns you on. Like it's really hard to actually quantify that in any way to say this
Yeah.
is why this is this, but you get that kind of inspiration and it just feels right. And I hear that all the time, but you still have to decide to listen to the quote unquote muse. You still have to have the guts to say, yeah, that's not something I've done before, but it calls to me and I'm going to do it. And this may not be the case for you, but I think a lot of folks are afraid of that. They're afraid to take those creative leaps and try things and see their own work look really bad in the beginning and all of that. It's not an easy path to take. And I'm really interested in people like you then who are just like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. I don't even care. I don't even care about how shitty it is because I like doing it so much,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe it has something to do with my age. I feel like I changed. There was a lot of things that changed in my life around that time. So, and we're going to get kind of personal here, if that's okay
That's
with you.
perfectly fine. Yeah.
So I was a heavy, heavy drinker for
Yeah.
many years, and I quit drinking probably about a year before the photography thing. So I was
Wow.
in like this year of clarity, and I've always been an incredibly curious person, even as a kid. Like I want to know how things work. I want to know, why people do the things that they do. I want to know everything. Like, if and so that's one of the reasons that I've pursued some creative outlets, like I did the writing and I did, some photography earlier and I've done some drawing. So anything that kind of interests me, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, try it out. So my curiosity level was magnified so much in that first year that I was just like, I've got to figure out like I'm interested in so many different things in the world. Like, what am I going to do with myself, especially with all the free time too? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
when you're a heavy drinker, you spend most of your time drinking. You spend a lot of
Yes.
time in bars. You spend a lot of time hiding. You spend a lot of time, you're
Hungover.
Yeah. Um, and so it was, a lot of free time on my hands, a lot of curiosity, and just a drive to do something with myself. And I think the timing of it was just kind of perfect. And just that conversation that I had with that friend of mine was like, was the spark that that set it on fire. And because I had done things creatively in the past and put myself out there and not really had any fear about doing that anymore, I didn't really think about it that much. And I'm incredibly lucky to be in the position that I'm in right now and to be doing the things that I'm doing. And I wish it for everybody else in the world because it's amazing. Like it's changed my perspective on life in so many ways and like introduced me to so many amazing people. And I would like everybody's life in the world to be like this.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
I feel fortunate, I'm
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah. When I was talking to my friend Tom, we actually had that conclusion that when you're creating something and it really resonates with you, you get a sense of satisfaction and contentment that is an inoculation against all the shit out there that's trying to tell you that, you need more. You need to buy more, do more, be more, all of this stuff.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, there's something really powerful about just being able to sit with your art and have that be the thing that fulfills you and not needing anything else.
Yeah, you have a much greater appreciation for what you do have. Um,
Yeah.
I think you're more connected with you're definitely more present, which I think is not the case with a lot of people in this world. I think it's hard to be present, especially in today's society with everything that we have going on.
Yeah.
We're just bombarded, but yeah,
Yeah, there's something to be said about age too. You know what you said earlier, and I'll bring that in with the drinking thing because I had difficult past with alcohol. There's a history of alcoholism in my family, and
mhm.
there was a point when I decided this is just not for me. It's not a thing I'm going to do anymore. And I've bottomed out multiple times, not necessarily with substances, but like with mental health. And there's different points in my life where I've reached this point where I was just like, I feel like shit doing this or on this course. I'm gonna have to change. And there's actually something liberating. Once you get to our age, you've gone through that cycle a few times. And there's something where you're like, I've already felt so shitty that it's okay. I can try to do so. Like my ego is
Yeah,
already
like how
smashed.
much worse can it be? I've already seen the
Yeah,
bottom of the barrel. Like, is there
exactly.
something underneath? I don't know. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it can't
There's
get any
freedom.
worse. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
So that's really
yeah,
great,
for
actually.
sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, that's fascinating. I didn't know that. I also actually didn't know when I invited you on that this is only something you've been doing seriously in this way for 5 years. And I mean, I think that speaks to your natural talent for it because, again, your work is so great. It looks like anything you would see in Rolling Stone or Spin or whatever, any of those magazines.
Yeah,
That's
wow.
good shit. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Now
So everybody go follow Michael.
you're gonna make
Uh,
me nervous.
oh. Okay, tell me about something that you're really proud of that you've done thus far. Like something that you really are excited to put your name behind and put out in the world.
Like from a creative standpoint,
Yes. Yeah.
I'm really happy with the work that I'm doing as far as photography is concerned, and I've been fortunate to make a couple music videos, which growing up in the MTV generation, they were hugely impactful on me and very much a part of my life and my music discovery as a young child or a teenager, I guess I should say.
But is there
And
I guess what I'm asking, is there a
I could,
specific show that you've shot or a thing that you've done with your
uh,
photography that you're like, this is
no,
aces?
no,
Come
no,
on.
it changes every single time. Like I can go, I don't know. I have favorite photos, and then they go out of favor, and then I have new favorite photos. I just try to do the best work that I can each time, and it's if I spend too much time with it, then I feel like I'm losing perspective, and I try not to compare myself. There's a ton of great photographers in this city, and I respect all of them, and I try to look at their work, but I also make it a point to not spend a lot of time with other people's work because I don't want to try to shape the way that I do what I'm doing in any way.
Mhm.
Like I don't need any outside influences. I'll take bits and pieces of advice or feedback and store it away, but then I have to, at the end of the day, I have to put all that aside and just focus on doing, the best that I can or what really inspires me. I think the biggest challenge is trying to tap into that well of creativity that's there and how you get there. And I'm getting off topic completely, but yeah, I just my goal is just to keep doing what I'm doing while I have the ability to do it, and do the best that I can and learn as much as I possibly can. I don't want to like sit back and look at something and be like, that's amazing. Like I did a really great job. I mean, I do that occasionally. I'm like, oh, I'm making progress. I think that looks better than, that I'm making, but I don't want to set it aside and be like, yeah, because I feel like you're kind of setting yourself up for, like I've actually accomplished what I wanted to accomplish when I'm not there. I don't know that I ever will be there. So it's a continuation. It's just
Yeah.
it's a nonstop journey. There's some
Yeah.
highlights along the way, but I would hate it was. I mean, it's like your children too. It's like which one is your favorite child? I made all of them. Some of them are better than others. This one's cute. This one's not so cute. This one's funny. This one's smelly. But whatever, they're all mine.
I do hear that from time to time, right? I mean, there are people who I think have certain things that are like standouts for them, but I think it's a hallmark of any dedicated creative person that they are never going to be completely satisfied with where they are in their journey. Which is not to say that, we want to be perfectionists and like hate on ourselves and be embarrassed of what we did in the past. A friend of mine, I'll tell you this little anecdote from another episode. She quit academia and wrote 4 books in 5 years, and they're a fiction mystery novels, and
Hmm.
they all kind of are part of the same narrative. And when she finished the last book, it took her about, I think, 6 years. When she finished the last book, she went back and reread the first one, and she was like, "Oh, this is so, you know." She could see her own progression, and she's like, "Oh, this is just, it feels so immature and blah blah blah." And her friend, who is a writer, said to her, "This first book is your Love Me Do, and the last one is your Hey Jude, and they're both okay for what they are, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
okay
No,
for an artist
yeah.
to progress in public. Nobody comes out the gate being," and I think that this is sort of a problem because today so much art is like, it's so commodified that a
Hmm.
lot of it doesn't even come out. What we're told is art or trendy or whatever has been so produced, polished, and gone through so many edits and so much stuff, right?
Yeah.
That it's pretty far removed from where anybody, whoever created it started. And so
Hmm.
for us, it just feels so icky to like make something and not have it be this perfect glossy thing that is going to be cherished for generations. But it's still important to do those steps where you start out doing sort of, the basics, and then you grow and evolve. And doing that in front of an audience isn't a bad thing. It's okay,
No.
I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, not to
Yeah.
have like perfect stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean some of my favorite stuff is just weird random street photography that I do, and like that I don't really do with intent. It's just I just put myself out there and I just, walk around and whatever happens happens, and it's probably the least edited. It's a lot, it seems so much more effortless than the live music. The live music stuff is incredibly challenging for
Yeah,
a lot of different reasons. You have no control over anything in that
yeah,
situation. You can't control the lighting, you can't control your subject matter, you can't control the space that you have to shoot in, the angles that you have. So essentially, if you're shooting with 5 other or 10 other photographers in the same pit area, you're all looking at the same thing from the same angle. So how do you be creative with it? It's
yeah,
like, how do you figure that out? So
yeah.
that's what I love about that. Well, that and the fact that I'm a huge music nerd. So I'm just, that's my environment. I want
Yeah.
to, I just
Well,
want to
I
be
think
there.
as somebody who has attempted to take photos of concerts before, I can attest to how hard it is. And I've seen so many shitty photos and videos from live shows. And then I've sat there and tried to analyze, like I look at really good photography, show photography, and I'm like, what are they doing here? I realize that some of it is equipment related. Like, you're not going to get the same thing on your iPhone as you will on a really nice camera with a lens.
For
But
sure.
there's also, I think what you're saying there, there's also that it's just because the environment is so constantly moving and it's just so
Chaotic.
frenetic. Yeah, it's really hard to get anything good. So you want to give us a phone? You got any hot tips for us?
For me, like I have to have a connection with my subject matter.
Yep.
And that really is, I mean, music. I'm fortunate I put myself in a position where I shoot mostly bands that I love or I have some sort of interest in. Like I may not know them very well, but so I'm familiar with the music. I've probably seen them, several times before, so I'm familiar with how they look on stage and how they move. And part of it is, for me, is anticipating what you think is going to happen and waiting for that moment to happen and hopefully capturing it, as opposed to trying to make something out of what's happening,
Oh,
if that
wow.
makes sense. Like
It
trying to
totally makes
force,
sense.
like I'm trying to force this photo. It's like sometimes you just have to sit back and kind of like sit with it. I'll take breaks while I'm shooting and just watch what's going on and anticipate or hope this is what's going to happen next. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And then also I think I subconsciously absorb everything around me as far as like structures and lighting and equipment and gear that's on stage. I had a friend tell me that I'm a line guy. Like when I shoot stuff like out in the street, I'm focused on lines a lot, and it's not a conscious thing at all. But like everything, there's a lot of like lines in certain ways. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
structure that's subconsciously included in my photography. Where I'm really focusing on the individual, like the performer or the performers. Everything else that comes into frame is purely it's unintentional, but I think it helps kind of frame that particular moment. I don't
And
know.
this is not a thing, just to clarify, that you're thinking about consciously. I mean, it really is just sort of
No,
you're in
no.
this moment. How do you
Yeah.
get into that moment? Do you have any kind of you and I both read The Creative Act, Rick Rubin's book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he talks about letting yourself in that, especially in the creative part. There's phases he talks about where you go back and you edit and you kind of refine things. But while you're doing the art and you're just getting it out there, or you're just doing it's a very dynamic moment, and you put yourself into that flow, right? You're not thinking consciously, but you're acting in an intuitive way almost. Is that something that comes naturally to you? Do you have to put yourself in that frame of mind? And I ask you this specifically because I know a lot of artists rely on drugs and alcohol to try
Yeah.
to get into that state of mind when they're
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
their art. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I mean, I'm aware this is a difficult question. I'm aware of when they in photography they talk about developing your eye,
Uh-huh.
when you start seeing things a certain way, like things stand out to you, like even ordinary things, and it shuts on and off. It's weird. Like I can be at work. I bartend part time at a restaurant. I can be at work and just my attention be drawn to something in the restaurant, like the lighting and a chair or something, or somebody sitting in a chair a specific way. And be like, oh, that'd be a great photo,
Nice.
And it's not always there. And I've thought about this for a while, and I don't like I can't I don't know where it comes from. I think Rick Rubin probably addresses it to a certain extent, that like there's this well of creativity that exists in the universe that we're capable of accessing, if we figure out how to do it. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I discovered that early on when I was shooting the live stuff, because I would go in, I would study videos of live performances and be like, this is the shot that I want. This is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to stand on stage. And I came to figure out pretty quickly that my best stuff comes in the moment and very unplanned. I think achieving that in a live music situation is easy because I'm incredibly passionate about music and it means so much to me. And especially if I'm shooting artists that I absolutely love and have a connection with, And I think it just makes it easier to do that job because it just inspires you
Yeah.
to do the best that you can. And but it's trying to access it is, I mean, I think there are methods, and I have like, morning routines and different things that I try to do. I don't find that drugs enhance it anymore than
Right.
it's there,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I kind of remember when I started seeing things a little bit differently too. And it was before I was doing photography seriously. I had a moment where I saw it was a very ordinary like drive down a street and the trees hanging over the street, and something about what I was looking outside the window just seemed completely different than what I recalled. It was almost like I was on drugs or I was high on something, and I was like, wow, I was like, that looks amazing. Like, why is that standing out to me right now
Yeah.
when I look at it, 2 or 3 times a day driving down the same street? Why that? I don't know. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
have any explanation. I'm fortunate that it happens. I enjoy it a lot because,
Yeah.
like I said, it's opened up my awareness just about the world around me, which I think is important, especially as a human being. There's a lot that we don't see, or a lot that we choose not to see, or maybe we've just been conditioned that we don't want to see that. And my whole goal is just to be a better human being, and being more aware and more present in my environment, I think allows me to do that. Hopefully, I don't
100%.
know.
Yeah. I forget, there was a famous writer who said something to the effect of a writer is a person who notices things. And I actually think that's true of anybody who's a creator. Like if you are a creative person, whether you're writing a song or taking a photo or painting or, whatever it is that you're doing, you have spent the time absorbing and connecting with the subject matter. You have allowed yourself to kind of stew on it, maybe even you're unconscious, maybe not even consciously, but you've allowed it to kind of be part of your internal life. And then you find that it just sort of you're sort of compelled, and then you start to do this thing. And it
Mhm.
sounds, the problem with all of this is that, like love or faith or anything else like that, creativity is so esoteric. It's really hard to put a pin on what it is and
Mhm.
how it happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
And
for sure.
yet you would say that it is then foolish to have a podcast to talk about creativity. But I actually think it's really important for us to, even with the clumsy limitations of our language and whatever, we still need to try to get to it so that we're all in, like, I want everyone to be encouraged. Exactly what you said earlier. I want everyone to have that feeling, to
Yeah.
be able to connect with that part of themselves and to get really excited about creating.
Well, I
But
think
it's just
in
that,
turn it makes you excited about life in general and
yeah,
people. I think as a society we've kind of lost that sense of awe and wonder, and we're missing out on this beautiful existence that we're involved in right now. It's kind of interesting and amazing, and a lot of us are just sleepwalking through it. So,
yeah.
and it's
Well, the
unfortunate.
purpose of art, I think, is to wake us up. It's to remind us that we're all human and that we each have our own specific, special lens. We don't live on an island. We're not all completely, detached from one another. I'm not, preaching some individualist thing, but also we are all individuals and we all have a unique set of experiences that inform our art. And, that's why I don't think a lot of artists who reach a certain level. I mean, yes, there are the snobby prima donna types, but I think a lot of artists are just, they're not threatened by other artists because no one can do, once you're plugged in and connected to what you can do and your view of the world, right? You're your own lens. Once you have that and you're secure with it, there is no competition for you because nobody
No,
is doing what you're doing in the way that
yeah.
you're doing it.
I mean, it should be a reflection of you as an individual, an honest
Yeah,
reflection,
right.
um, and how you interpret the world. And I think a lot of artists are incredibly empathetic people too. I think we sense and feel things about the world and other humans and life and in ways that maybe some people don't. I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for for other people in this world. I mean, I just observe,
Yeah,
but back to your point about having conversations about it and having a podcast, I think it's great. I mean, I think conversations are I have regular coffee conversations with a small group of people that from different sectors of life that I just absolutely respect and gain knowledge because I don't know, I feel like a lot of people stop learning when, they're done with college or, they don't pursue like expanding their just life education or any education by any extent. And we're part of an evolutionary species in an evolutionary world, and it changes so much that I think for me it's important to just continually learn more and more about it as much as I possibly can. And I think one of the easiest ways to do that is to have conversations with other humans,
Yeah.
other humans that you may not think that you have. Everybody has a story, and I've learned this. I've been a bartender for many, many years, and I'm in it not because I enjoy mixing cocktails for people. I enjoy entertaining people, but I enjoy the hospitality aspect of it. And I love having conversations with people from all sectors of life and all over the world because it helps me to understand humanity and people and where we are and why we're doing the things that we're doing. I mean, you can rail against governments or governmental policies or this or that or different groups, but I think at the end of the day that you open up yourself to understanding where everybody else stands and why or how we've gotten to that point, then it makes it a little bit easier to cope with all this stuff that can be incredibly negative and overwhelming, especially in the world that we live in today with, I don't know, social media
For
and,
sure.
our news system that has become more entertainment and it's all just doom and gloom. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I understand the world's a terrible place, but it always has been, it's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's a ton of
No,
beauty
that's
in it.
right. That's right. In addition to, I also think that art plays a really important role in reminding us to embrace life and to pursue joy and all of those great things. I mean, to me, one of the hardest things about the pandemic was the lack of live music. To me, live music is the ultimate celebration of life, right?
Yeah,
I mean, what is
absolutely.
better than being in a crowd of people and having these amazing performers and having that kind of interplay with the band and the audience? Like all of that is just it's the closest thing to magic I think there is, frankly.
Oh yeah,
And
it's better than
and
church.
100%. But when we couldn't do that during the pandemic, it was hard. It was
Yeah.
really hard. And there just isn't a substitute. Like fucking watching some band on TV or on Zoom is just not going to cut it. I do think that there's an important role for all art, but especially live music, to remind us about what life is for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I part of going to a concert or a live performance is really about the experience. And, I like venues where I have the freedom to explore and watch the interactions between the artists and the audience and to see how the audience responds and how they make that connection. And when it happens really well and the artist is feeding off the energy of the crowd and the crowd is getting just as much in return, it's kind of hard to duplicate, and it doesn't happen all the time. You just can't go to every live show. There's some I've seen some clunkers from some people you wouldn't think.
Oh yeah.
It's weird. It's a weird magical thing. A lot like we were talking about, like where does this come from? It's like how that thing. There's no formula to it. But when it happens, it happens. It's pretty amazing. It was strange. Like during the pandemic, I didn't. I think I had seen so much live music for so long that I didn't miss it as much as some other people did. I do recognize it when it came back. I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I did miss it a little bit, but I don't think I had any fear that it was going to go away, permanently. And I think that's what a lot of people are like. How's it going to look? What's it going to look like when it comes back? And
Yeah.
or when is it going to come back? I don't know. There were a lot of question marks back in those days. So
Well, I mean, as long as human beings are alive on this planet, there's going to be
yeah,
concerts.
it'll be
There's just
something.
going to be. That's what we do. We've always done it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, it just occurred to me though when you were talking about, uh, I don't even remember, but something you just said a few minutes ago is that your particular art is about capturing other artists doing their work, right? Which is a really unique art form because you
yeah.
are doing art, but you're also trying to convey the artistic style, aesthetic flair of these amazing artists on a stage.
I'm not. as a photographer, I'm not a fan of doing like I like, creative portrait, but I've never been a fan of like the posed, like typical like family picture or like
Uh-huh.
headshot
Yeah.
where, you're putting on a face or you're putting on a smile or you're pretending to be something that you're not for that moment. Maybe. I don't know.
Hmm.
Maybe it is you. It doesn't, for me, when I'm looking at a photo like that, I'm not seeing the real person that exists behind those eyes most of the time. So when a performer is performing, finding those moments where you can see them purely in what they're doing artistically and almost on like a whole another like conscious plane because it takes a lot to do that. You have to put yourself into that space, especially whenever you created that song or you wrote that song, and performing it is a whole another like physical and mental and like emotional trip for sure. And when you can capture them in that moment where it relays what that hopefully or what I interpret is what that song or what that performance means to them on just a purely like completely honest level. I think that's the best part. I mean,
Absolutely.
you can get people jumping up and down and doing fun things and lots of cool lights, but it's more about like capturing that moment on their face or just whenever they're performing that feels completely honest and true.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Like if you juxtapose a really great, intense photo of a musician that's just in the moment, all of that expression on their face, you can tell they're just really into what they're doing. You take one of those and it is worth 8 billion hours of shitty concert videos, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not like you get more of the feeling of the
Uh-huh.
performance from a really well constructed or well composed photo
Hmm.
than you
Yeah.
would just by recording it. And I think that speaks to what photography is as an art. In a
Yeah.
single image, you are capturing an entire scene, a mood, feeling that you
Hmm.
can't just get by pushing record on your phone.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, hopefully you're conveying that it's the connection that you're making with that artist and what they're doing. And hopefully that's coming out, in the photo or the image or however you're presenting it. And, like I said, I've put myself in a position where I'm photographing people that I already have a pretty strong connection with easy. So I think that makes it easier. And when I take photos of bands that I'm not super interested in, I can tell it reflects in the stuff that I get because I'm just taking photos. I'm just taking pictures of people performing, and I don't get nearly as much satisfaction out of that as I do making that connection with the artist when they're on stage and like generally being excited for them in the moment too.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
there. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome because that's the feeling. I don't know, like this is so cheesy, but like that's the feeling, right? Like as somebody who is a as a creator, the feeling of being in the moment is so powerful and beautiful. And it's like it's that thing that you're constantly forever chasing, right? I want to be
Yeah.
back in that flow. To be able to capture that is so like it's so important, and it's also just so like exciting and inspiring. I think that's why I enjoy looking at your photos and other concert photography when it's done really well. And that's
Hmm.
why it's so annoying to me when I see shitty photos and videos of concerts because I'm like, why are you wasting my time? Like I don't want any of that.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
because the concert experience means so much to me, having people like you who are willing to get in there and translate that moment in a way that can be revisited over and over again is like it's a gift. It's a gift to the world, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to make too much of it, but like I'm really
Yeah.
passionate about this topic.
No, I can tell.
Yeah, I'm like you. Like I love music, and I was that little kid. I used to just post up next to my parents' stereo with a stack of 8 tracks.
Yeah.
Linda Ronstadt, right? Or plugging them in right and left, the Moody Blues, and just like dig it as a little kid. I was that
Yeah.
kid too. And I started
Yeah.
going to concerts, as soon as I could. And that was such an important part of my life. I mean, I have 21-year-old kids. They never go to shows. I'm like, what the fuck? Like I was
Yeah.
at every show I could growing
Yeah,
up.
I think it's different, I think it's I don't know. I mean, yeah, of course I see a lot of people that go to shows for whatever reasons that they do. I mean, a lot of it's a social thing, and as the Austin music scene has changed a lot, I've seen the crowds change, because it's kind of it's a status symbol. It's like, oh, I was at this show, or oh, I was at this show, and that's
Yeah,
fine,
that's true.
I mean, it's great for the artist either way. I'm not judging, why people, but there are those of us and that are in it for reasons that are incredibly personal and magical. It's kind of hard to, I moved to Austin with the intent of seeing as much live music as I possibly could. I grew up in Temple, Texas, 60 miles up the road. And as soon as I figured out what live music was, like my first show was the Go-Go's and Wall of Voodoo at the Frank Irwin Center. And once I
What?
saw that, I was
Yes.
like, I want to see this all the time. So my mom would drive
Yes.
me down. She would drop me off. I was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old. And she would just
Yeah.
drop me off at the Irwin Center and let me go see a show. And back in those
Yep.
days, in order to know what was playing, I had to call them on the phone and listen to a recording of what was playing the next couple of months and be like, I want to go see that show.
Yeah.
And I was the kid, who read all of the music magazines, all the heavy metal magazines, and my walls were covered in just pages of magazines. I guess that's part of my live music photography. I guess it's just like I never really paid that much attention to it, but now I look back at it and I was like, oh, my walls were covered with photos of people performing and guitars and amps and all kinds of stuff. So I guess it's just been ingrained in me since the beginning.
That's
But
awesome. Okay, tell us, who do you like to shoot in Austin?
like local bands
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Who are
just
your
in
favorites?
general?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, like who, like, I want people to, well, I also want people to hear about some cool local bands, but also just like, what is it that, if you could order up your perfect, opportunity to go take some concert photos, what would it be?
God, you should have prepped me for this because it's going to take me like a day to try to figure this out. I, you know, unfortunately, and I hate saying this, I don't spend enough time with the local artists as much as I would like to, just because of my schedule, and I do enjoy shooting the bigger shows for just because at first I was like, oh, the bigger shows, they're fine, but I'm going to focus on like the smaller. And as I progressed in my work, there's some advantages to being at ACL Live Moody, which is probably my favorite venue to shoot at for
Hmm.
many different reasons, but the production can be absolutely amazing. The access is a lot better as far as like moving around and getting specific compositions. But there's some interesting stuff happening in the local scene. Obviously everybody's paying attention to Die Spitz, and I mean, how could you not want to shoot that? I mean, it's a punk rock circus on stage, and it's different every time. It's amazing. I mean, the last time I shot them, I probably had 50 fantastic photos from the shoot. It's like they're just little rock stars.
Yeah.
There have been some I don't there's like some local performers that I enjoy watching, and sometimes I set out to capture images of them, and I I enjoyed. I think Die Star is kind of fun. There was a band that I caught during Levitation that I'd heard a lot about called Font that I was
Yeah.
really impressed with. They had an incredibly solid 45-minute set with only, I think they have 3 recorded songs out. It was incredibly impressive. So they're on my list of seeing again. Yeah, I don't know. There's like I said, I don't spend enough time in the local scene as I wish
So
I could.
what, like, how do you decide? I mean, aside from the fact that ACL is there, but like, how do you decide if or when you want to go? Is it just if you have the spare time, or,
Yeah,
you know?
well, like I said, I still have, a part-time job as a bartender, so that takes up some nights. So I don't have all my nights free. And then when I do have free nights, I'm usually scheduling them around mostly touring. When it's touring season, I'm averaging, maybe 2 shows a week. So between, those and my job, South by Southwest is, I see that as like, I really don't go into it with any agenda. That's my discovery time.
Oh,
So like
nice.
all the local bands or like any mid-tier bands that have kind of been on my radar for a while, hopefully they'll be there. And I have, being in the music scene and being in Austin for so long, I have a great network of people with incredible taste in music that I trust. And so it's just like sourcing, these people and, whatever radio stations I'm listening to or podcasts or whatever. Like I source my interest from many different spots. And as far as music is concerned, my taste has changed quite a bit. I mean, it's always changed. It's always in flux. But I've come, and I think a lot of people kind of pigeonhole themselves and get into like a lane or an alley about what kind of music they'll listen to.
Yeah.
And when I worked as a manager and a booking agent for a while, and as a manager, I had to learn how to listen to things without any influence outside. So, a band would hand me, freshly recorded material, and I would have to judge whether I thought that was good or not. That's without anybody saying you should listen to this, because everything you listen to is probably influenced by something.
Uh-huh.
So you either heard it on the radio, somebody mentioned the name of the band that you respected, and you're like, oh, okay, then I should listen to that. You read an article about it or something. But to go into something completely fresh with no influence whatsoever, other than maybe knowing the artist and listening to it and trying to judge whether or not you think it's good or not, is kind of challenges your own personal sense of like, do I have good taste? Like, do I know what I'm listening? Am I good at this? Like, you just have to learn how to trust your own instincts. And music for me at this point in my life really is just the soundtrack to where I am mentally or emotionally. And it changes every day. It's like, what kind of mood am I in today? That's what I'm going to listen to. So I have like all these different types of bands that I'll pull from. It could be old bands, it could be new bands. I'm always interested in people that are pushing the envelope of making new and creative stuff, but still making it sound functional and relevant, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like, we're in an age where everything is going to be influenced by the major decades of the early years of rock and roll. You've got the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. The 90s is probably where it started to just become diluted and, super, commoditized. And,
Yeah.
we just, it's like you won't see any more music movements as big movements anymore. Everything is influenced by all of the previous movements. So bands that can pull from old stuff, new stuff, and put it in a package that sounds new and different without sounding repetitive, and kind of like opening up new space for new material or new music to come through is really, what I look for or I'm listening for.
I actually think that is pretty relevant because we're talking about, driving our inspiration, and your creativity isn't just something that comes from, I mean, it's not just something you're doing. It's about you interacting with your environment. And, you're constantly going to have to be going out there and looking around at stuff, seeing what's new and bringing it in and weighing it and deciding if it's something, part of your going to be part of your inspiration, part of your world. And, it's hard now because more than any other time in history, we have so much of it to wade through. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
so much. And a lot of it has been, like you said, diluted. And I want to kind of segue from there and ask you, just from your personal opinion, I have a friend who he is a photojournalist professor. He teaches photojournalism in Georgia. And we've had this conversation about how much the world has changed since the advent of the cell phone, where everybody now
Mm-hmm.
has a camera in their pocket,
Yeah.
and whether or not that diminishes the value of professional or artistic photography. And I'm curious to know, I mean, do you think that, and to be fair, all of this kind of hand wringing happens everywhere. It's happening in music, it's happening in writing, whatever, where we're like, well, if everybody's doing it and there's just all this crap out there, how are we, how do we even know what's good? How do we even find what's good? It's just like a glut. How do you feel about that? Do you think that more people having access to photography is diluting it as an art, or do you think that there's always going to be space for photography as art?
I think there'll always be space. I think it's easy. I mean, you can have as many tools as you want, but if you're not creating something, and I hate to keep using this word, but it's a big word for me over the past few years. It's like if you're not creating something that represents you honestly or is being done in an honest manner, and people will realize that. I mean, it's got to be something you connect to, and the human element is always going to be there, no matter what tools you have to make it. You know, the tools are always going to change. You know, I mean, even you think about music in the 80s, it's like everybody was like, you know, disregarding the synth and the new wave stuff. They're like, oh, that's garbage, you know, it's not real. And it's like, no, it's just a different tool, you know, for communicating what's going on, you know. That's how people are expressing themselves. So as long as it's being expressed the way that it should be, and I'm not going to say should be, but just in a way that you can connect to, then it's always going to be there. Now, we can get into a conversation about artificial intelligence and whether or not you can connect with artificial intelligence. Hopefully that conversation's down the road. But yeah, I mean, yes, you can duplicate art to a certain extent, but if it's not something that you can connect with, then it doesn't matter. It's just a photo, or it's just an image. Like, but that's up to the person that's interpreting it, you know?
Agreed.
Like you can, I don't know. It's a
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want no art police. I don't want people going around being like, you're not an artist, you're not a writer. Like I don't like
oh yeah.
that, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, you
Um,
know, I think Banksy did a good job of kind of shaking up the traditional art world by doing the things that he's done. He's like, look, I paint on walls, you know, and now you want to put me, you know, in your auctions and in your museums. And it's like, that's not the world that I want to be a part of. If you like it, you like it, you know. The whole
yeah,
shredding of the painting at the Sotheby's auction was brilliant, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Slapping, you know, was a slap to the face of the, you know, the traditional art world of people who are declaring what's good or what's not. And he's like, well, here it is. You like it, it's good. You want to pay $3 million for it? I'm going to shred it. And then it sells for more money after that. So it's
yeah.
like, you know,
Now
uh,
that's art, baby.
yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah,
All right. Well, Michael, you've been very generous with your time. This has
absolutely.
been a
Thanks for
great
having me.
conversation.
Yeah,
I'm so glad to have had finally had a chance to talk with you. Like I said, I've been following your work for so long, and it turns out you're utterly charming human being, in addition to being brilliant
yeah.
and
I
talented.
was trying to figure out if we had met before because I know you did some writing for Cosmic Class, did you not?
I
And
do. I do
yeah,
occasionally. I do. Yeah.
yeah. Because I did some, you know, I did some photography for them for sure, and then I did some reviews as well. I enjoy the process of writing. You know, I still do quite a bit of writing, but
Oh, do
doing
you?
shows,
Okay.
yeah, it's mostly personal stuff, but I try to do it. Maybe when my new website comes out, I'll have a blog component to it because I would like to. I don't know. I like to discuss kind of like my process, what's going on in my head as far as like how it relates to my life and, you know, this new journey. Because I really
Yeah.
do think that, you know, in 2020, right before the pandemic, like my life changed in so many different ways that I'm a completely different person. And I have people that have known me for so many years that are like, you're not nearly the same person that you were before. And there's a lot of things that I think contributed to that. And, you know, photography, art, are definitely one of those things. And I don't know, it's brought me a lot of joy and awareness about the world that I live in, and I want everybody to experience it.
And that's awesome. That is as it should be. I'll encourage everyone once again to follow Michael all of the places on the internet. Please check the show notes for links and be nice to him on the internet, or I will come and find you. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much.